Hello, Farming Secrets community, and welcome to another Let's Talk Soil. Today, we're joined with Declan. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Ray. How are you?
I'm good, and I believe you have been working with soil for some time.
I've been working with soil for some time. Yeah, I started off in the world of horticulture actually, and in nursery management. So dealing with artificial soils, growing media. But soil was always the most interesting part of my work, and I gradually just transitioned over to doing postgraduate work in soils and specializing in that area for the last 20 plus years.
Excellent. And that's what your business is now. Do you want to share a bit more about how you help people with soil?
Yeah, well, I've got probably 30 years history with various public services, starting off with local government and then a few state governments, New South Wales, Tasmania, and Victoria in that order. And in about 2014, I finally left the bosom of the public service and started working in private practice. And this year opened my own business, Regen Soils. So-called because my postgraduate work was in sustainable agriculture, as it was called then, and sustainable agriculture has kind of morphed through various formats, including low input sustainable agriculture, biological agriculture, and there's a certain coalescence happening now around regenerative agriculture, and really it's the same thing. Actually, but in regenerative agriculture, it's a term that I think people can relate to. That's not alienating. That's not special or weird or anything like that, and certainly draws very much on the science of soil, and something that we want to build on and build the credibility of Regen Soils going forward.
Awesome, I love that, and I think we are really at that pinnacle point at the moment where the science and the soil is all kind of meeting and getting to that point. And so I guess, I'm curious to know a little bit more about what does soil mean to you at a personal level?
Well, the more I work with soil and the closer I work with soil, the more awe I have for soil. What we're learning these days about the intelligence of natural systems is really awe-inspiring. We used to think, and back in the early part of my career, we were told, a significant function of the soil was to hold the plant up, which, demonstrates such a desperate kind of hubris on the part of humans and the scientific community, where we just think that we stick it in. And certainly then post the Green Revolution, when we developed all these really powerful tools like synthetic nitrogen and superphosphate and all of those things that were refined and developed through the Green Revolution, we thought how you grow plants is by using the soil to hold the plant up and then washing it with all of these soluble fertilizers, and that worked really well for a while. But in that process, we completely forgot the most important missing link in the soil, which is that soils are alive. They're one of the most complex ecosystems on the planet, if not the most complex ecosystem on the planet. We have described 84% of all vascular plants on the planet. So we're across plants. We've described them, we've named them. There's still about 16% maybe that we don't know, according to best estimates. Well, according to those same best estimates, we have currently described about 1.5% of global bacterial populations. Wow. So we are profoundly ignorant, really, when it comes to the microbiological world. And that's something that we're really only just beginning to take the lid off now. And the more we look at it and the more we understand the role of these organisms, particularly in relation to plants, and how plants can direct, cause and effect relationships in the soil to get what they want. It's the soil has such an intelligence that were I to describe it in any more detail, I would sound a bit batty.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave it at that. But I agree. And this is several times that this whole word of soils being alive has come up as I've been interviewing different soil experts. And so if you've been listening to all these Let's Talk Soil series, then you will see that that's a common theme. And I love the fact that, there is so little that we know about it, and it's so complicated. Yet we try and be human and smart and intervene and think that we can control it, which is, always makes me kind of giggle inside.
Yeah.
On
that, while we're talking about soils being alive, I think there is a publication in your catalogue, Ray. I'm not sure if it's still there, called Soils Alive. And it was a publication that myself and a colleague put together back in 2010 when I was working for the Tasmanian department. At the time, there was a lot of interest emerging in soil health and in soil biology. And but the problem was, if somebody wanted to measure their soil biology, it was quite an expensive process, and they'd get a result back saying you have this much bacteria and fungi, but what does it mean? So what we set out to do, we got some funding from the federal government, and we set out to say, well, can we use invertebrates as indicators of soil health? So we did a study across a range of land uses, looking at the things that you can see or almost see with the naked eye or with low magnification, and started counting those. And the results of that are contained in this report called Soils Alive: Understanding and Managing Soil Biology on Tasmanian Farms. What it showed us was that on a per square metre of soil on an organic dairy farm in northern Tasmania, we were getting something like 96,000 organisms, individuals, per square metre of soil. And then when we looked at a range of other land uses, which related really to the degree of cultivation in those land uses. And the worst offender was conventional potato production, because those soils get worked and worked and worked through a single growing season. And on those soils, we had populations maybe in the order of, just a few thousand soil organisms per square metre. So they get evidence about how hammered soil populations get from cultivation. No surprise there, really.
Wow. Yeah, that's so great that you were doing that research. And that Soils Alive is available still in what we now call the bundle, which has heaps of resources and guides and checklists and things that are there on our website. So many years ago, what got you so interested in soil? Was there a moment in your life that you just went deep in the soil world?
Gee, I don't know, Ray, and I don't think I've actually asked myself that question. I don't remember there was a kind of, aha moment or anything like that. But really, as I went through, I realized that, I guess what I realized was it all just kept coming back to the soil. Everything that we learned about plants and growing them and everything else, if the soil just seemed to dictate everything, and if it wasn't right, then, then nothing was right, really. Or we just spend our time pushing the proverbial uphill. So that was a time when I decided, okay, I really need to understand this medium a bit better. And when I decided to undertake postgraduate studies, with I did a master's through Sydney University, I decided that what I really wanted to know more about was soil organic matter, because I knew that soil organic matter is the fuel that drives soil function. And it's pretty much what everything, or what most things that live in the soil, what they require for energy, directly or indirectly. And I felt, well, if I could get my head around soil organic matter and how that influences all other aspects of soil performance, then that would give me the kind of insight that I was really looking for into soil.
I love that. And so now, with your years of compounding knowledge, are there some telltale signs that you can look at soil and look at it and say, well, that's actually healthy soil?
Well, that's a really good question. I'll share a little anecdote with you. I remember somebody saying to me years ago, so many people wouldn't know a good-looking soil if they stumbled across it. And I was working in my garden in Hobart one day. My daughter was helping me, and she was only about, I don't know, maybe 7 at the time. And we were clearing out an area underneath a big cotoneaster bush. And cotoneaster is very heavy shade, and they drop leaves and everything else. Anyway, the soil underneath this was really beautiful soil. And I didn't say anything to my daughter. And next thing she said to me, wow, this soil is really nice. And I thought, my God, how did she know? How did she recognize even that the soil was nice? It's, it's not like she worked in the garden with me a lot, or that I had talked to her about what a nice soil was. She just knew. So instinctively, she knew what a really nice soil was. And I think we all know that, and we know that because most of us have encountered it, and where we typically encounter it is in our vegetable gardens. And we pull back the mulch and we see things jumping and we see worms scurrying and all this. And I think we instinctively know it's dark, it's friable, it's got a good smell. And these are, the classic hallmarks of a good soil. And contrast that to what we have out in the paddock, which is usually compacted, hard, dry, bare, and we're not connecting the dots here. We're kind of saying, oh, well, I can't have the good soil in my paddocks because of, A, B, and C. I maintain we can have those soils in our paddocks, and it's all about management. And an example of that is I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and I'm doing a similar one again, all about weeds. And
hot topic.
Hot topic. So I have one slide in the presentation which I entitled "Bloody Neighbours," but for decency, I asterisked out the two O's, because we often talk about the bloody neighbours who don't look after the thistles and the cape weed and everything else, and we're standing there on a windy day and we see all this seed blowing into our paddocks and thinking all those weed problems, if the neighbor looked after their weeds, I wouldn't have a weed problem. Well, there was some very interesting research I uncovered from, I think it was the University of Ohio, and some obsessive compulsive there counted that there was, over 1 million seeds per square meter of topsoil in a healthy pasture soil. What that tells us is that, yes, whilst we don't want to see all the thistle seeds floating in from next door, our soils are full of seeds of all descriptions. They're full of weed seeds, but they're also full of seeds of native grasses and forbs and everything else. But the way we manage our pastures really determines what shows up. So if we manage our pasture like a dairy farmer, for example, and put on heaps of nitrogen and grow heaps of ryegrass and everything else, we've pretty much got ryegrass. But if we manage it, poorly, and we're in a brittle environment or low rainfall, and we've got sheep, and we let the sheep eat the soil right down to the ground, are we going to be surprised if we get weeds in next year? No, we're not. And similarly, there's been a lot of very interesting work that looks at soil condition. What kind of weeds, what are weeds telling us about the condition of our soil? And we know that we've got weeds like dock and oh God, what's the one that's escaping my mind now? But we have weeds that tell us we've got acid conditions in our soil. We've got weeds that tell us we've got compaction. We got weeds that tell us we've got waterlogging. But all weeds are telling us something. And the more we can tune into what the weed is telling us about our management of land, the better position we're in, rather than reaching for the big guns, every time we've got a weed outbreak.
Yeah, that's such a good point to make as well, because I've heard a lot of stories of farmers who are moving to a regenerative way of farming, and then all of a sudden something grows and they're like, well, we haven't put this seed here in 20 years, and so the seed's been sitting there waiting for the right climate, the right soil, the right mineral balance to then germinate. And so this, and I don't think the weeds are telling us something. I think they're yelling at us and screaming at us, saying, help with this. And we're just got to learn the art of observing and slowing down and taking note of that. So I think that is a really, really good point. If there's one thing that someone could be doing to advance their soil health, what would you think that one thing would be to step someone in the right direction forward?
Look, for me, it always comes back to organic matter. So whether you're a vegetable grower with a really kind of short rotations and you're whipping one crop out and putting another crop back in, how are you managing your organic matter in that system? If you're a sheep farmer out up in the Victorian Alps, or in a dryland environment, how are you managing your organic matter in that system? And it's so different how you manage your organic matter in those systems. But if you're not approaching your farming system saying, I have to protect and enhance the organic matter status of my soil, your soils are probably going backwards. And if they're not going backwards, they're really not improving. And, as an example, in those really high rotation, those fast turnover soils, like in, vegetable production, very difficult to grow carbon in those soils, because you want a cash crop in there all the time. So in those situations, you've really got to look at importing carbon, because of course, every time you till, every time you take a crop out, your carbon is sliding downhill. So you've got to be constantly replacing it. So importing carbon is a fine thing to do. If you're the sheep farmer out there and you're battling weeds and you're battling, poor ground cover, one of the things when people say, I've got too many weeds, I say, well, have you got too many weeds, or have you got not enough grass? Because if your paddocks were full of grass, would you have this number of weeds? But unfortunately, the grazing system that we tend to employ is the grazing system that was imported 150 years ago from Europe, in non-brittle environments, in environments where there's ample rainfall, where you could set stock, and it's not really a problem. But you employ the same grazing management practices here, and it's disastrous, because we don't know how to pull out when there isn't enough, when the grass stops growing. Over there, the grass doesn't really stop growing, apart from in the depth of winter. And if we can keep the grass growing and keep good ground cover, we don't have weed problems, and we're building soil organic matter.
Yeah, I love the fact that, I just want to emphasize what you said before about protect and enhance. Sometimes there are situations where you can't enhance it quickly, but it's a really good, I guess, responsibility of the farmer to protect what is there. If the organic matter is low, then protecting it is better than letting that completely degrade even worse. So I just want to emphasize on that, because I think that's a really important part of it, is that everyone's so busy trying to grow organic matter. And I think sometimes we can get lost that it's really important to protect what we've already got as well. And that's already a step in the right direction. So I just wanted to highlight that, because it really, it hit home for me when you said that. So thank you.
Yeah, and it is important. And in terms of the one thing that you can do, probably the one thing you can do in terms of in any system is trying to keep the soil covered. In regenerative agriculture, I'm part of the first regenerative agriculture training course that's happening here in Victoria at the moment. And as part of that, we released a series of 7 videos, which I think, Ray, you've got a link to on Farming Secrets. Yep. But in that, we highlight the principles in regenerative agriculture. And one of the principles is about keeping soil covered. And I just used a very simple analogy of, like we wear clothes not only for kind of modern decency, but if we weren't wearing clothes, the sun, particularly on our fair European skins, the sun would wreak a terrible toll on us. So why is the soil any different? Why do we think we can bear the soil and have no consequences to that? When we bear the soil, we bake the soil. And the top couple of centimeters of the soil is the most fertile part of the soil, the most valuable part of the soil, because that's where there's most biology, most carbon, most fertility. And we bake that in the sun or allow it to erode away by wind and water, and it is a tragedy, nothing short of a tragedy. So keeping soil covered all the time is really important.
Absolutely. And there may be some farmers listening to this while they're tilling on a tractor, and you're not doing anything wrong, but you just need to say, is there a different way? Question the way that you're doing it. And I think you're quite right. Like we wouldn't, I always use the same analogy, very similar to yourself, of like, especially when it comes to nurturing kids, we're very protective of the kids. We're always like putting jumpers on, putting hats, rug up, but then the soil that can't fend for itself, we treat exactly as if you were to put a young child out in the sun without any protection, and you'd be, kind of labeled as a very, very bad parent if you did that. And, you know, and it's just like, we do have the education now, and we have so much research where people are, Gabe Brown is very, has videos about this where he'll have thermometers and he'll measure this ground and that ground. And there's not just a little bit of difference, there's a massive difference in degrees between ground cover and no ground cover. And so we don't have to wait for the, you know, for this massive shake-up. Just start doing something differently. And I think ground cover and armor, as they also call it, is there to protect the soil. It's the armor against the harsh suns.
Yeah. Now, some industries, you know, you mentioned the farmer on the tractor who might be tilling at the moment. You know, some industries require tillage. Sometimes strategic tillage is an important thing to do. So I'm not saying that tillage is wrong, but we know that tillage has consequences. So if we're going to till, and we need to till, and we may very well, it may be a very good thing, an appropriate thing to do. It's kind of what we do next. That's what I always say. You know, what are you going to do next? So if someone says to me, "Oh, you know, I want to deep rip my paddock," and I go, "Okay, you've got a good reason. There's compaction there. Yeah, okay, deep rip the paddock.
That's right.
What are you going to do next?" You know, because if you deep rip the paddock and you don't address the underlying causes, it's just going to recompact, and probably within 1 to 3 years. So it's always with the long view in mind. You know, what are you going to do next? Why are you doing this? And how are you going to get a better outcome out of this particular action?
Couldn't agree with you more. There's always a reason to do something, and if it outweighs it, then it's definitely the right thing to be doing. And I have to second that, because sometimes we do fall in this trap where people say you need ground cover, and people think that they have to do that tomorrow, or no tilling, and you've got to like sell your tractors, you know, today. It's not about that. It's all a journey. It's a process. It's the right thing at the right time. And just having that bird's eye view of your farm plan and putting measures in place. And, you know, regenerative agriculture isn't something that you can just flick on and off overnight. It is something that is a process. It's a slow evolving, season by season improvement of the soil and mindset shifts and changing processing. And so it's definitely important to know that there is sometimes a reason why you need to do something, even though others are saying that you don't do that anymore.
Yeah. It's a journey. It's a journey of discovery, you know. And I think one of the most damning things that I ever heard was I read a paper years ago by an Australian researcher, and he was critiquing the Green Revolution and said that you know, the Green Revolution effectively turned farmers into turned farming into a recipe-driven system, which effectively robbed farmers of how basic soil fertility worked, and turned farmers into technology applicators, which is a kind of terribly damning thing to say. But I thought at the same time, you know, I'm partly responsible for that too. You know, I said to farmers, you know, follow this recipe, you know, use these inputs. This is how you farm. But it was, like I said, back in the day, it was with a terrible oversight of how soils really work, and the importance of everything that is alive in the soil.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because Helen and Hugo, and the reason why they set up Farming Secrets is similar. Hugo ran a farm store recommending, they had glyphosate on the counter as like an upsell, like, "Oh, have you tried glyphosate this season?" You know, and so then they questioned and went, "Why are we putting skull and bone chemicals on our food?" And, you know, and then one thing led to another. And I think we all have, you know, through evolution come from a bad space and then realize that we need to move in a different direction. And we're definitely seeing that with the way that we grow in our food.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. And so, Declan, how can people get a hold of you and spend more time with your amazing content and the work that you do?
Well, I'm sorry to say that my website is not yet developed, but I can be contacted, I guess, through Farming Secrets. I'm still doing multiple jobs at the moment, but and I'm extremely busy. But this is the space that I want to move more fully into, of Regen Ag. And I think what I would really like to do is, you know, work, and what I enjoy most doing is working one-on-one really with farmers, and being a kind of coach or a sounding board for ideas about, well, I want to try something different. Is this a good idea? And I can fairly quickly say, yeah, it's a brilliant idea, do it, or no, don't do it, or do it, but change a couple of things here. And just to save people, it's a little bit like the people that build a house say, gee, if I was ever going to build another house, I would really save myself so much heartache and grief.
Yep.
Well, I built a few houses in terms of doing things in the soil, some that worked and some that didn't work. So I've come out the other side and have a pretty good idea of where the pitfalls are.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess it's like learning, you've learned the experience, what to do, what not to do, and now you can take other people through that journey. And if anyone wants to, reach out to us, we can put you in contact. But I also feel that you're going to be spending a little bit more time around our community, because you're just a wealth of knowledge. And I think everyone within our community will benefit from hanging out. And there are a lot of case studies and people in our Farming Secrets Circle community and membership that will love hearing your content. So thank you very much for parting your wisdom with us today. It's been so great talking all things soil.
It's been a pleasure, Ryan. Thank you very much.
No worries. And until next time, everyone, remember to get your hands dirty and start digging deeper into your soils.